Mama, mama ubuhlungu gula. Before usurpers placed boundaries, colonial boundaries in Africa, we did a lot of traveling and sharing of knowledge. Our ideals were rooted in the same ideology that nature is God. Which is why the sun was thought of as God, because it controls everything. And it's also the first emergence in the cycle of creation. That's why the Ngunis call the sun Velingandi, which means the first emergence. The Sutus call him Ramasedi, the ancient Egyptians call him Ra. The oldest African calendar in recorded history is in Mpumalanga here in South Africa. Mpumalanga also alludes to the emergence of the sun. Mpumalanga literally means sunrise. And that's where scientists and tourists traveled to see the oldest calendar in the world, a rock formation, which Western scientists refer to as Adam's calendar. In Southern Africa, we call it Inzalo Yelanga, which is a Zulu term, which directly translated to English means birth of the sun. Ancient Egyptians also called the sun Atum, representing the nucleus of an atom, because the solar system is basically one big atom, and the sun is the nucleus that controls and sustains everything. This is why African calendars revolve around either the sun, the moon, or the stars and planets. All the natural elements work together, maintaining a cosmic order, and our ancestors understood that order. They carefully mapped it out to measure time and to connect with the cycle of nature. Losing the connection with it meant losing the connection with Source, and aligning with nature allowed us to tap into abundance. This is how we manifested rains, fertile soil, and fortune. African kingdoms were about expansion and legacy, which for some kings involved conquest. Southern Africa had Nguni conquerors like Shaka Zulu and NGWANE, who was the king of the Swati people. Pre-colonial Africa is rich with stories of powerful kings and queens who did amazing things. A lot of the stories that I'm most familiar with are closer to my heritage. As Swatis, we used to call ourselves Bagangwane after our king Ngwane, and even Eswatini was originally called Gangwane after the king Ngwane who conquered the land that is now known as Eswatini. I don't bring Eswatini up just because I'm Swati, but because it's the best living example that we have of the royal structure that was prominent in ancient Africa. As the last monarch, although I personally feel that the royal house has lost its way, it still in very few ways serves as an example of the structure of kingdoms in ancient Africa and how they relied very heavily on the cycle of nature in order to prosper. African kings often ruled with their mothers and the advice of their council and seers. A seer in our language is INYANGA. INYANGA is also the word used to describe the moon and the month, because according to the lunar calendar, a month is determined by the cycle of the moon. A seer or INYANGA is someone who understands the cycle and knows how to work with it. This is the knowledge that gave kings power. It helped them to grow their kingdoms and build their legacy. King Swati III of Eswatini, the last absolute monarch in Africa, also has several seers, Dinyanga, who advise him, guide him, and also heal him. Their knowledge of alchemy and the practice thereof is part of the reason that the king is still in power to this day. Besides all of the economic corruption of the king, which is a story for another day, the Swati royal family is heavy into ancient African alchemy, to the point where it even enters the realms of dark magic. But the one precious thing about the kingdom itself is the preservation of ancient African practices, which keeps that alchemy alive. Even though the majority of the kingdom's population now identify as Christians, the whole nation still participates in ancient African traditions and ceremonies. Ceremonies such as INYANGA. INYANGA is a national ceremony that takes place during the first full moon after the summer solstice, when the sun god is at its closest proximity to the land, pumping it with enough hydrogen to sustain them for the rest of the year's cycle. Ancient African solar and lunar deities are honored, and the strength of the kingdom is celebrated. In recent years, the king has come to make it more and more about himself rather than the spirituality of the people. And churches of the New Testament in the country also preach against ancient African belief systems and practices. But INYANGA has never been defeated. It's still one of the undying ceremonies that still happens even to this day. And it's still powerful. INYANGA involves a rain dance to the moon goddess because she controls the waters, Nomkhubulwane. And it always rains after INYANGA. People who participate in INYANGA leave recharged with hydrogen from the hottest sun of the year, and their land is also recharged and nourished from the rains. So the ceremony merges the masculine and feminine, the sun and moon, fire and water. And a lot of other rituals are done within the ceremony, which were originally intended to connect with the Divine Mother and Father, our creators. Ancient African calendars are clocks that show us how the cycle works and how to tap into the flow of creation. The solar cycle rules the day and the year. The lunar cycle rules the month. The stars are the numerological system that helps us keep track of exactly where we are in the cycle. The zodiac, as we know it today, is based on the fixed solar cycle that our ancestors mapped out for us according to the solar seasons. The seasons of summer, autumn, winter, and spring. These same seasons can also be applied to the hours of the day because the sun travels that exact same path in a time span of 24 hours. The word hour comes from HORUS, which is the Greek name for Heru. Heru became Horus, became the hour. Even in Swati we say lihora, because when you say what hour is it, you're basically asking where is Horus positioned in the sky at this very moment. Horus or Heru is the sun god or the son of God. That's where the son of God narrative comes from. That's where the story of Jesus comes from. YESHUA. The sun god or the son of God, because the cycle of the year is the cycle of the sun god YESHUA or the son of God. And in Egyptian philosophy, he had different names at different stages of his cycle. The cycle of the sun dictates the stage of life on earth. In the winter, we're the most vulnerable, and in the summer, we're the most abundant, physically and spiritually. We're just now coming out of our winter season and heading towards spring, leaving behind the winter solstice, thank God, and approaching the spring equinox, which is very exciting in terms of just life and productivity and spiritual backing. The spring equinox comes with the renewal and the rebirth of our natural world, which is also a really big influence on our physical and spiritual bodies. And our cosmic bodies are aligned to the cosmic rhythm, which is slightly different from the fixed seasons. The fixed seasons or the tropical seasons, you'll know more about the fixed seasons if you check out the African calendar video, which is where I talk about the origin of the zodiac. And the zodiac is based on the fixed seasons that our ancestors mapped out in the Temple of Dendera, in the Dendera zodiac, where they have the 12 fixed seasons on the outer circle. The rhythm of the stars in the cosmos is slightly different from our fixed seasons, and our ancestors detailed the stellar rhythm on the inner circle of the Dendera, just to make us aware of the precession of the equinoxes. Precession is when the stars move back by 1 degree every 72 years, and this precession adjusts the yearly clock over time. So as the centuries progress, we see an adjustment of the yearly clock over time. And this slightly adjusted stellar cycle is known today as sidereal astrology. And it's actually the most accurate way to read astrology. It's used in Hinduism. Hinduism comes from Vedic religion. Veda is the Sanskrit word for knowledge, and it's a collection of hymns, ideas, and practices composed in archaic Sanskrit. This is the earliest form of Indian scripture. No one can give an exact date as to when the Veda were composed, but the composition of the Veda is estimated somewhere between 1500 and 700 BC. Vedic astrology is based on sidereal astrology, and sidereal astrology comes from ancient Kemet, the stellar rhythm that usurpers found detailed in the Temple of Dendera in ancient Kemet. So I've mentioned that the stellar rhythm is slightly more delayed than the fixed solar rhythm, and it continues to fall further and further behind as the years go by. It takes approximately 24,000 years to return to its original point and align once again with the fixed seasons. The solar rhythm is referred to as tropical astrology, and the stellar rhythm is referred to as sidereal astrology. Sidereal astrology is currently a season behind the northern hemispheric solar cycle. When we talk about sidereal astrology, we're talking about the exact placement of the sun, the moon, and the planets within the solar system. Tropical or Western astrology is not always cosmically exact, which means that it is sometimes vulnerable to inaccuracy. For instance, a lot of Western horoscopes and astrological websites and apps will tell you that the sun is currently in Leo, when it is very much not in the sign of Leo at all. The sun right now is in Cancer, and it will remain in Cancer until roughly the 10th of July. It doesn't actually stay in Cancer for the same amount of time as it stays in other signs, because some constellations are bigger and wider than others. They're not all the same size. So sidereal astrology was a way for our ancestors to teach us how to read the constellations and the cosmos in detail, and to understand the exact placement of the planets, the sun and the moon within the stellar rhythm. Because although the tropical seasons, the fixed solar seasons, affect our natural environment and our physical bodies, the cosmic order affects our cosmic bodies. And our cosmic body is what dictates how we move through and navigate this world. So the inner circle of the Dendera isn't fixed, which is why it was sculpted separately from the outer circle of the Dendera. It's placed in there as a system of its own, that although it's related to the zodiac wheel, precession causes it to fall back 1 degree every 72 years, which then mixes things up a little bit, because even things like our birth charts, in order to know what your sun sign truly is, you have to know your sidereal sun sign. Like I said in the previous video, I grew up identifying as a Taurus, and that would be the case sort of if I was born in the northern hemisphere, but because I was born in the southern hemisphere, I was born in the season of Scorpio, and that's according to the tropical astrology, which is outlined in the Dendera zodiac. According to sidereal astrology, I'm actually an Aries. I was born when the sun was directly in Aries. Because I was born in the tropical season of Scorpio and the constellation of Aries, I am an Aries Scorpio. This is where we now separate the sun sign and the star sign, and they become two different things. My sun sign is Scorpio because I was born within the tropical season of Scorpio, but because the sun was directly in the constellation of Aries when I was born, my star sign then becomes Aries. Both of them dictate and influence the way that I navigate this natural world, and only the stellar cycle, sidereal astrology, will be able to show you that accurately. The most reliable astrological system to consult would be Vedic astrology, because Vedic astrology is based on the sidereal astrology that comes from ancient Kemet. So right now the northern hemisphere is in the solar tropical season of Leo, which is Horus, Heru, and we in the southern hemisphere are in the solar tropical season of Aquarius, originally known as the house of Ma'at. Those are the solar or tropical seasons that we're in right now. Our stellar rhythm places the sun in the house of Cancer, otherwise known as the constellation of Neptet. This means that the constellation of Neptet will be the one that influences our cosmic bodies the most until the sun exits that constellation on the 10th of July. Western astrology will not tell you this. Most of the apps and the websites that you check out won't tell you where the sun actually is. They're all based on the fixed seasons, which is actually totally fine. All it means is that they sometimes miss vital cosmic information, which is why sometimes horoscopes or astrological readings don't make complete sense. Like sometimes you'll resonate with a horoscope but feel like something is missing, and that's often because it's missing key information, like missing links that can only be connected through sidereal astrology. An interesting example would be how we just came out of the season of Set, which heightens the energy of chaos, right? And before that, we were in the season of Sekhmet, which heightens the energy of purgation and war by way of fire, because Sekhmet fought with fire. But the cosmic placement of Saturn retrograde in Set is the stellar or sidereal detail which helps us to understand why this Sekhmet and Set season were so much more intense than the seasons that we've seen in recent years. And during this time, Western horoscopes would speak of Saturn retrograde in Aquarius, when our stellar rhythm actually places Saturn in the house, in the constellation of Capricorn, of Set, which is Saturn's house of exaltation. Saturn rules the house of Set, and when they're in alignment, like they've been in the past few months, and we still have a few months to go of them being in alignment, it's a very intense cosmic alignment, because Saturn is a very powerful planet which rules structure and law enforcement and our limitations. Everything that limits us is ruled by Saturn. The last time we saw Saturn retrograde in Capricorn was roughly 30 years ago, because it takes Saturn 29.5 years to orbit the Sun. The last time Saturn was retrograde in Capricorn was in 1992. Historically, in that time, we see a lot of riots and political unrest. This Saturn retrograde brought that same kind of energy within our Sekhmet and Set season. A lot of unrest, a lot of riots, looting, burning, just an exhibition of the characteristics of the gods of those seasons, heightened by Saturn's retrograde in Set. So when we understand the exact placement of the planets in the cosmos, we're able to understand what's happening around us, what's happening within us, and we're also able to see some of these things coming because we understand the energy that the gods are offering us in that time, and we're able to work with it. These seasons are an influence of the gods, an energy for us to tap into. They don't actually control our actions, they only create the energy that support those actions. So right now in the southern hemisphere, we're in the tropical season of Ma'at and the stellar season or sidereal season of Neptet, which means that these are the two deities that influence us the most in this current time. Ma'at is the goddess of justice and order. She restores order after the chaotic season of Set, restoring order to the creative forces that will have been in a state of chaos in the season of Set. I explain more about Ma'at and her function within the cycle of creation in a video on the Girlboss SA channel, which I'll put in the description below. I'll also expand on Ma'at a little bit more on this channel because I haven't spoken on her decan spirits, and I've seen the requests for me to speak more on the decan spirits, which I'll be doing in upcoming videos. So in the southern hemisphere, Ma'at is currently ushering us into a space where we start to find ourselves slowly becoming more focused, starting to have a heightened sense of direction. Whilst the sun in the constellation of Cancer gives us Neptet's power of new perceptions. She stimulates new perceptions. She brings us second sight, precognitive dreams, and communion with the natural forces. So we're essentially entering a season of inspiration, of big ideas, and heightened connections with source. I hope this video isn't very long because I just wanted to do a quick intro into some of the topics that I'm going to be expanding on, just because we've been quiet for such a long time. As a team, we've really been laying low because the winter is a time of isolation, physical and spiritual isolation. It's the time to purge, to purify, and to regenerate. So we've been really aligned with the death and darkness of the winter solstice, and we're really excited to come out of it as we head towards the spring equinox, because we have so much content to burn through, so much to teach, so much to share. And as we continue towards the spring equinox, I'll keep you updated on the seasons as our ancestors have taught us, just to recover some of that lost knowledge. There are things that I'm not really going to expand on the channel, which I preserve more for my personal clients, things like our individual cosmic bodies. It's just easier to determine on a one-on-one level, so that's something that I do for clients, but the general lessons are for us to discuss here on the channel. A lot of the videos of me talking I'm going to put in the membership section for members only. I really like to use this platform for a variety of teachers. I just haven't been interviewing as many people because of COVID, staying home and trying to stay away from people, because a lot of people have been getting sick, and our team is kickstarting some projects where we will be working with some people, some healers, some teachers, drummers, musicians. So in the spirit of keeping this as short and sweet as possible, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for the love, and thank you for the patience that you've had with us as content creators lately. Don't forget to like and share, and stay home and stay safe and stay healthy. More life.
Ah, yeah.